Okay, fellow scrappers, we're going to be covering some very important subject matter here, and we're pretty much going to look at a few components in the game and see how using better building practices we can avoid corrupting our files and creating extremely laggy environments. Um, to be honest with you, I had built a fort and it got corrupted. And all this time, I've been practicing pretty good building practices, and I didn't realize that doing certain things in a certain way can really screw up your world save and make it unusable anymore. And so I've designed an experiment here to help you guys see what exactly is going on when your world gets corrupted and damaged. So what we're going to do is we're going to start off with testing what I would probably have to call the breaking point of certain components in the game. And what I mean by testing the breaking point, we're going to focus mainly on one of the most simple building blocks for the scrap mechanic game, and that is the bearing, which I have right here. The bearing we're going to stress test, and while we're stress testing it, we are going to see some pretty interesting things. Um, we're going to be using this, I guess this stress test ratio measuring concrete block here that I've set up. And here is my highest stress setting right here where I'm putting the jack. And as you can see, what we're going to be doing is we're going to be jacking this up. And we're going to be putting stress on this one bearing and seeing how it reacts to this stress. Now, a lot of you who have been building are probably already aware that bearings, they sort of have a flexibility range where they'll move around in relationship to where they were originally placed and the contact points between those two things, whether that be an object and an active object like a wheel or something that the bearing is acting upon or anything else. But the reason why this test is so important is because when you stress test something, like right now, I just lifted up the jack in its highest stress setting, okay? And we got a movement of the connected point, which is the base of this lever object. And as you can see, we got a full block's worth of movement there. And on the other end, which is my which is part of the resistance of this whole experiment, is the end of the lever with a seat on it. Now, eventually, if I keep pushing up on this, you're going to see clipping into the jack right there. Now, this is really important to notice because even though we've sort of set up a fulcrum here and we are getting lifting, we are getting a real world reaction of an amplification of the jack. Look at how much movement we have in relation to the original place point of the bearing and the pivot points as they've been established. Um, the more stress you put on a bearing and the more opportunity you create for clipping, like in this example, the more of a chance you're going to have to corrupt your world. Um, Let me bring this back down. Now, excuse me. Let's move the jack into a safer position here, like at the end of my ruler there. Now, you really want to avoid clipping, guys. You really, really want to. Even if a bearing moves, bearings are designed to flex. I've been stress testing them for a while now, and they'll flex, they'll move up. And as you can see, I'm getting a more friendly response with less stress on the bearing. Now, there are lots of ways you could really stress out your bearings, guys. Um, and if you stress them out, what you end up doing is you cause different blocks which would be functioning adjacent to those bearings to clip and overlap. Now, if you could look here, we're getting a good twist, and it's being handled well. Now, for another interesting part of this experiment, what we're going to do is we're going to move to the other end of this experiment because really interesting stuff is happening over there, and I want you to be able to see it. Now, we're going to leave the jack here, and we're going to travel quite a bit of distance because Scrap Mechanic does interesting stuff over distances, and I want you to be able to see that, and I'll be able to show it to you in this experiment. Okay, check it out. This was set up perfectly parallel to that point, but Scrap Mechanic apparently introduces a chaos or some sort of chaotic variable that causes drift. Now, this drift happens and will self-correct if I'm in the vicinity, as you can see. Now that I'm in the vicinity of what's going on over here, I was able to lift and drop the jack, and the problem corrected itself. So, at a distance from what you're working on, things can get weird. Um, Now, let me jack myself up a little bit. You understand what we're doing from a previous episode where I've used this as a mechanical advantage tool to jack me up into really high places. It's a cool way. It's a neat thing to do with the lift that otherwise you might not utilize to make your life a little easier. But I'm gonna jack myself up like crazy. Okay? Now, I've flung myself right up next to uh, this antenna, right? Now, as you can see, my motion has completely stopped. And if you are watching this in 1080p at least, you should be able to see the jack at the distance. And for the most part, I'm stuck, right? Not necessarily, and I'll tell you why. Because if I start to manipulate the jack, which is at a considerable distance from me right now below, I'm pressing down and up and down and up, you'll notice I start to move. So you're probably thinking, Scrappy, what's the point? It doesn't matter if moving the jack a little bit causes you to move. Clearly, it must be somehow hitting the the platform you're on. But the truth is, it's not. If you really look, it's not hitting the platform. And if I stop moving it, then the platform stops. There's no relationship visually between the platform I'm on and what I'm doing with the jack. The only explanation is that Scrap Mechanic is handling things locally. And if I do something at a distance, like manipulate the jack, locally, that bearing is affected. And the idea or the concept of gravity in the game becomes relevant in that area. So, why is this so important? Okay, I've built an extremely long object, and Scrap Mechanic doesn't want to handle this object in its entirety all at one time. So, something needs to be happening locally that causes me to move. I shouldn't be able to move now unless I get my maul out and start hammering on it. So really neat stuff is happening here, and I want you guys to be able to be aware of that because um, overstressing your bearings, causing parts to clip into other parts will damage. It will literally damage your scrap mechanic save. So at this point in the game, considering this video was made for you during a beta, I think we're in beta now. Um, be really careful, guys. If you have a lot invested in a particular world that you're working on, you could lose all that. And as you can see, um, this what's this thing called? This place where I'm sitting is still moving because I'm just jacking the jack up and down. No contact at all. So really cool stuff here, guys. Really cool stuff to be aware of in this game. As this area becomes lower, where I'm at, eventually the concept of gravity will kick in. Because even now I could probably stop. And see, I freeze. If I move around, you'll see the jack is still not contacting. And even though I think I consider myself way beyond a gravitational threshold, I'm still just sort of frozen there. And it's not like I have this counterbalanced down there with anything. I mean, I'm at the end of a bearing, on the opposite end of a bearing. So really neat stuff. Really neat stuff. Why is this important? Okay, I'm gonna keep playing with the jack so I come all the way down. Guys, you're gonna lose your worlds. If two objects clip into another, now I have to implement the jack to slow my descent. Actually, no, I won't slow my descent. Let me clip on purpose. Let me see if I slam down into this and clip. Okay, I couldn't clip on purpose. Um, Actually, I should try to clip because clipping, giving you an example of clipping is really important. So, for this last part, let's see, what have I done? I've shown you the stress on a bearing. I've shown you spooky action at a distance, which is what's going on when I'm manipulating the lift at a distance, and other stuff in the vicinity of the lift is actuating, stuff that shouldn't be moving at all because they were in a frozen state. But now what we're going to do is we are going to stress test this to the limit, push a bearing hopefully to its breaking point, and show you the effects that would have. And hopefully it won't make me look like I'm an idiot here, but okay, let me put a relevant object here. Now, this was actually considered set up as a way to prevent this from moving around too much, but my good intentions actually got me in the butt and I had to remove it. So let me rebuild this wall here. This is considered a different object, this wall right here, because I have it connected to the ground. And even though this looks like I've made a traditional lever with a support structure on this side, my good intentions actually created problems. And I'm going to move the lift to its highest stress point right here. And I'm going to jack this thing up quickly. And what's going to be happening here is going to be happening at a distance. So let's see how that's calculated. We're going to have one action going on way over there. We're going to have me riding this beam way over here. And let's see what happens if I crank this lift at full throttle at its most stressful point. Here we go. Boom. Okay, we have a break. And look what this does. Absolutely loco. Absolutely loco. Um, what I showed you was the breaking point of a bearing. Let me eject from this seat now. Well, let's go look over there at what happened. Now, I'm sure many of you have experienced this or something similar to it already in Scrap Mechanic. And that's when something that you were working on went totally crazy. Now, this bearing is still connected over here, and it has a relationship with this side of this lever. As I bring the jack back down, the object, excuse me, the object is going to remain clipped into the tree. That's when it stopped. It stopped when it slammed into the tree and clipped into the tree. Now, this doesn't mean that your world is over and that everything is done. You could still recover. And how you recover is by trimming out or cutting out the areas that are clipped. So, and allowing a pathway back as the system tries to reconstruct itself. Now, I need to clear this block out of the way again because with this block in the way here, the path between this repairing itself won't be clear. I also need to move my jack out of the way. Now, I remember that it was this top side here is where the bearing was connected. So that's these 2 points want to reconnect. They do, but they can't because a part of this structure now is slammed into this tree. So I won't have to rebuild this whole thing, but what I will have to do is separate these two. There's a couple ways to do this. You could try to get your jack in there and jack it out. And let's jack this out of there if we can. Now, because of the length of this object, there's just no way. There's no way it's going to be able to rewrite itself. So I'm going to have to trim it down to size. Let's bring it down to about this length and see if it can reconstruct itself. Let me cut this piece off right here. Okay, it's trying. It's flinging itself around like crazy. Okay, there we go. It docked. It docked back in to its original placement. And this pretty much just saved my world, okay? Um, when you can't get a problem like this resolved or repaired in your game, if you can't get it to dock back on the way it was intended, if another part would have been in the way, like this bar here, you would have you need to continually trim away whatever's in the way to get your bearings back in order. Or, worst case scenario, you have to actually go in there and delete that bearing, and you'll preserve your world. But I'm serious, guys. Something as simple as that. This was just a one bearing experiment. There is one bearing in this entire world save, and that was it. And that's what one bearing can do to your world. Imagine when you have 15 or 20 or 30 or 40 bearings, right, in your world, and you're working with springs and you're trying to create an end result to something that you've built, and you can't figure out why. So you have to literally go back. You have to see if there's any clipping between any blocks. You have to go remove that point of clipping. And if you still can't fix it, that's because the stresses on your bearings have been pushed beyond a level of self-repair, and you need to take that stress off those bearings, like I just showed you. If you could do that, you can literally repair your world. So I hope you liked the video. I hope that you were able to learn some things about scrap mechanic here. I hope this will give you insight into about how if you had a world that may have not worked out for you, what you might be able to do to go back into that world and even possibly recover it. Another worst case scenario, though, is if you've worked on parts in a world and those parts just spontaneously vanished, like it has happened to me, then that is pretty much a lost cause because you can't repair something you don't have access to. So if let's say this entire mechanism here vanished, and this has happened to me before, if it does and it just poofs, it's gone. It probably fell into the world or fell below the walk mesh and is down there just in a constant free fall or whatever bouncing around, then that's going to be a damaged component of your world that maybe in a future video, I don't know if I'll be able to figure out that one out, but for now, that would be considered a lost cause and you'd have to restart because you will never regain the frame rates uh, or 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 the damage done by something like that. But I hope you guys liked the experiment. I hope you guys did learn something about about your world and what's going on. And if you have any more questions, feel free to leave them in comments. And this video's ran long enough. I think I rambled enough through it. So thanks for watching. Bye bye.